Welcome to the Home Building Hub, your essential podcast guide to building your new home. Hosted by industry experts Colin Bischoff and Darren Brennan, this conversational podcast will help better educate you about all things new home building so you can avoid costly mistakes and enjoy your building experience to the fullest, no matter which home builder you choose.
Hey there folks, Colin here from the Home Building Hub, sitting with co-host Darren Brennan, and welcome to another episode. In this episode, we're going to give you a summary of building quotes and what are the items that essentially are made up within those quotes. We're going to give you a bit of an overview and a bit of an insight into what makes up a quote, the common items, I guess why all quotes are not necessarily the same, what makes up a really good quote, and then we're going to outline and finish off with some common mistakes that we see home buyers make. So before we kick off, if you want to know, I guess if this is the first time you've listened to an episode and you want to get to know myself and Darren a bit more, we're not going to ramble on about ourselves right now. Just take yourself to episode number 1, introductory episode. You'll get to meet the hosts and you'll learn a bit more about us, who we are, what we do, and hopefully that's enough information for you to validate that we've come from a bit of experience and also explain to you what the podcast is about, okay, so and the purpose of the podcast. So over to you, Daz. How are you going today?
Mate, going great, Colin. Mate, I don't feel like I'm sitting here with the same Colin I'm normally sitting here with, mate. You're looking amazingly sharp today, mate. For those listening in, Colin has shown up today looking like $1 million. He's got the tie on, the suit jacket on. Mate, what's this all about? I don't know. Is there any...
Well, thank you for noticing. And thank you for
noticing
for passing that over like we didn't plan it in advance. But yes, for those who are listening, it won't matter. But the last couple of weeks, Darren, we've had such good feedback on the podcast, which is great. But I've had a couple of little bit of negativity come my way. And that's been around the fact that I'm just wearing T-shirts and hoodies to a podcast, which is just FYI an audio medium. But I thought, you know what, I'll take the advice of the 3 or 4 people who've reached out within our industry. They are, Darren, and they've said to me, look, geez, you don't look very professional and things like that. So I thought if I could provide our listeners with better value by dressing up and wearing something like this, suit and tie, and, you know, I'm willing to do that. I'm going to give it a test and call it a social experiment, Daz. If we can get some feedback saying that the value out of this podcast was better than the others because I was wearing a piece of material around my neck, well, I'm willing to continue to do that. So
I love it, mate.
That's what I'm doing. Yep.
I'll give you a tip. I'm not showing up with a tie on, mate. It's just not happening. I can't even get the button done up around my neck. So,
yeah, I must admit, it's been a while since I've sported a tie. It's not really my cup of tea, never has been. But anyway, I guess a bit of a joke on that sense. And the reality is, I guess, if we are attending a business appointment, we do pop on a collar, of course. But for the sake of our podcast, we're really about providing value to you more so than worrying about what we're wearing. So anyway, we'll see.
On that note, though, Colin, it's interesting. I walked into a place this week and myself and my boss were both wearing suits. We didn't have ties on, but we were both wearing suits. And the lady did comment. She actually said, "Oh, wow, you guys are the first 2 blokes in suits in here today." But you could tell it was a genuine comment. It wasn't a jibe at all. So you know, showing up in a suit sometimes does. She had no idea what we did. She didn't ask. We didn't tell her. But it was just an interesting comment. So, mate, you're looking sharp. Well done. Looking forward to the added value you're going to bring today.
You're welcome.
But, mate, I was certainly smiling when I turned my camera on this morning or the computer on this morning, and here you are sitting in a suit. So, mate, you've made my day, if nothing else. So, well done. I want to kick it off. We've got a fee for the podcast. Hopefully people are picking up on the fee now, and we really appreciate those that have, which is, if you like the podcast, just share it with one person that you know, or as many as you like, but certainly with at least one person. And if you're getting value out of the podcast yourself personally, please write us a 5-star review. We'd really appreciate it. It'll help spread the love a bit further out there and get it more exposed and get this information into the hands of more people, which is what we're all about. We do have a disclaimer that we need to kick the podcast off with, which says, whilst we're all about providing you to value, this podcast should not be considered as legal or financial advice. It contains general information only, and you should seek out independent professional advice on your personal situation before making any legal or financial decisions. So that gets the formalities, and you've brought the formalities today out of the way, mate. I'm going to keep at this all the whole podcast. I'll be all over it. But mate, we'll kick things off. Mate, what makes up a building quote? What's the essence of a building quote?
Yeah. So again, to repeat, we'll summarise here. We'll keep this as high level as we can to a degree. So for people to understand when they're starting that process, we want to help you understand that a building quote is made up of, essentially for the most part, 90% of the time, made up of some common items. We want to help explain what they are to you today. So the first main item that's made up in a quote is the price of that plan, and we refer to that as a base price. Okay, so it's important to understand that a base price will represent, I should say, the inclusion level that builder is putting out there. Okay, so you may have a base price that's $250,000 with really basic inclusions and pretty much zero upgrades, and you may have a builder who puts out a base price that's $320,000 that has an additional $70,000 of upgrades that the first builder didn't. Okay, so that's the first thing to understand, is that not all base prices are equal because they have different levels of inclusions within them. On top of the base price, there's other things that make up a quote. We're talking about things like site costs. So that's obviously the price to essentially establish the foundation of the home, and that differs for every single block because every single block is different. OH&S, so occupational health and safety requirements. Sometimes that's put in there by in the quotes by builders, and council requirements, things like that as well. So estate requirements are a pretty common one. So when you build in an estate, a greenfield estate, what happens is that particular estate may have a set of rules and regulations that you must have either on or in your house in respect to building there. So some of those things might be like recycled water, or the way the facade is presented and things like that. And also facade selection is something within your quotes you've got to be mindful of. So most builders will have some standard options and then some upgraded options as well. And then obviously promotions, a lot of builders put promotions in there, additional inclusions that may not be included in the standard, like flooring, cooling, and some other upgrades like kitchen upgrades, bench tops, dishwashers, those sorts of things that may not necessarily be in the base price. So they're all factored in as well. And I guess to probably help you understand, for those at the start of the process, house and land packages, like we've covered before, Daz, they're probably going to be on the lower level in terms of their pricing and their inclusion level. So they'll include a base price, site cost, estate covenants, and perhaps a promotion, and just to get that price point where it needs to be. But when you go and sit with a builder or a sales consultant, when you go through the process, you're more likely to add on some of your own personal preferences, your needs and your wants. Might be some upgrades in the kitchen, higher ceilings and things like that, okay, if they're not standard. So that, I guess that hopefully gives you a bit of a summary of what is included, and we'll probably cover a bit more detail as we go through. But what I want to do, Daz, maybe a question for you, back to you, is would it be fair to say that all quotes by builders are the same?
No, it wouldn't be fair to say that they're the same. And that probably kicks off from where you started, Colin, which is, obviously even the base price can vary. So straight away, you've got a differing base price for the same size house with a similar facade, because the stuff that they've got inside that home will vary. So it does make it pretty difficult to compare apples to apples. And I know ourselves when we do it as a business, and likewise your business, Colin, it's difficult even then to try and break it down. Someone's including this, someone's not. How do you put a value to it? Is it even important to me? Et cetera, et cetera. So it is pretty difficult to break down those, items, I guess, and even individual items, one builder charges X dollars for a roller door, the other builder charges a different figure. So, you're getting this variation in pricing the whole way through the quote. So it's difficult in that respect. And that keeps them, keeps you on your toes as a consumer to try and work out your way through that. And, I think a lot of people do want to wander into the builder, and say, well, I can get the roller door for $800 off another builder, but you're $1,000, and will you match that price? And they're trying to break down the price per item the whole way through the quote. And it's a challenge. The builder sets a margin on that product, and that's what they need to operate. So, they'll certainly talk to you about working with you a little bit on the price at the end, but they're talking about an end price, not the individual item price. And, you want to find your way through that jungle a bit and work with a consultant to feel comfortable where that's at. With respect to the base price, that's reflective of the standard inclusion. So there'll be a standard set of plans and a standard inclusion, and that standard inclusion is a list of items that's included in that base house. So, you've got to try and work your way through that. And as you mentioned earlier, Colin, those variations between someone who's going to price a really cheap base price of less inclusions versus someone who's going to have a higher base price. And then it'll pick up on other things. So some builders will offer the statutory warranty, for example. Others will offer a lifetime warranty. If they're offering a lifetime warranty, you're going to pay more for it. That's just the facts, right? But you have to weigh up what's important to you as the consumer as to, how are these things going to work along the way. Some builders will their price will be valid for 12 months or 18 months. Some are even out as far as 2 years, right? Other builders will only price out 6 months. So again, it's cheaper for the builder to build in 6 months' time, most likely, than what it will be to build in 2 years' time. So the base price will be reflective of those things. I guess, the other thing is the same for site costs. So when you're working your way through the quote, you're going to have some builders, and I would say most builders include an M-class slab, but others will include a H-class slab, so a higher level of slab, a more expensive slab in the base price. Therefore, their site costs are going to appear to be cheaper. You'll also see builders these days break down site costs in many different ways. So they'll break it down to be the slab part and the excavation part, and then they'll break it down into other items that, and they've chosen to do it that particular way as a builder because they think it's the right way for their business. But again, that makes it more difficult for you to compare like for like, apples for apples. So you're going to see that the whole way through the quote. And, I guess it's a matter of really asking more questions so that you feel comfortable with what is being included in that quote. So, yeah, it's certainly got its challenges when you're trying to work out, am I comparing apples to apples?
So on that, Daz, I think just to add to that, like with your garage door example, we see obviously so many items in quotes as a home buyer, and it does get a bit confusing as to why is that builder X and the other one's that, a lower or higher price. But the reality is, like, you've got to look at the bottom price and your needs and wants, and make sure you're happy with that. The reason for that is that perhaps one builder has a higher price for that garage door from the supplier they use versus the builder B has a better rate, and therefore they can justify a cheaper price. It also, like you said, Darren, it might be the margin they put on. Maybe builder A puts on a bit of a higher margin and builder B puts on a lower margin. So at the end of the day, it all sort of flushes itself out, and I wouldn't be too worried about little items like that. And with site costs, yeah, you're right. They are presented in different ways, and probably more so than clouding people's judgments. Well, that's the way the builder operates and prefers to present their quotes, because that's how they've priced it up internally. Okay, so it can look a little different. One of those examples is council requirements. Not all quotes or builders will have that in there because they've factored it already into the site costs, or OH&S requirements as well. It might just be site costs are this much, and they already include council and OH&S. Some builders break that apart for you to make the site costs seem a little bit more palatable, and it all sort of, as I said, washes out in the end. So, Daz, what about what do you think makes up a good building quote?
I guess what you want to make sure is that all the items on your wish list, to the most part, because you don't want stuff to be missed along the way, are included in that upfront quote. So if you've got specific items you want, without getting ridiculous, because there will be some stuff that the builder's consultant won't be able to price you, and it might be just there as a bulk sort of allowance. For example, if you go to their colour studio, or you're doing an electrical appointment, and the sales consultant in the case of an electrical appointment, they're not necessarily the expert. Some will be, depending on how their business operates. But a lot of builders, they're not expecting their sales consultants to work through that. They'll put you into the hands of an expert in that field. So they might just put an allowance in, and that'd include, $5,000 in there to include some PowerPoints, some extra downlights, etc., some TV points, that sort of stuff. So, but you want to make sure that allowance is in there so that you're covering that cost. The last thing you want is a surprise. And I guess what you also, don't want to get caught up into is sometimes you can have what seems to be a really cheap quote, but what you're actually missing is some of the fundamental things that are going to be required to build that home. And a classic example would be if bushfire attack level was missed, right? But it's required. It's several thousands of dollars of upgrades required to the home to comply. So, you want to make sure that stuff's checked off. And so when you're comparing the two, ask more questions. If you see something in somebody's quote and not in the other, do a bit of homework. If it's one says, well, it's a design guideline or a covenant, grab out your land contract and have a quick read through it and make sure that, hey, I understand now why they've put that in. Seems like the other person might have missed it. I need to get that added in the other quote because I don't want the surprise later. So, I guess you want to sort of make sure that those items are covered. The other one I think is really important is covering structural items because they're going to be on your drawings, right? And they're going to be on your upfront drawing. So if you're trying to, add an additional cupboard into a room, get it noted in the quote, get it shown on a markup set of drawings, and then when your drawings come out, that should be on there and it should be priced accordingly, and now you've actually got it. The last thing you want to do, and again, it'll depend on the builder you're with. Some builders will say, no, you missed that, so we're going to charge you a fee to have that added in. And you don't want that fee. You want to get that right up front. So be sure to be checking those sort of items because the last thing you want is a headache and a delay in the process as well. So, has to go back to a drafting team. Some builders, they might get it drafted that day. Other builders might have a schedule of work and it might not be able to get drawn for a couple of weeks. So, that delays your process and that, time is money. So, be mindful of those sort of things. The other bit I'd really highlight would be if there are any bonus offers or discounts that have been off, they might say, we'll give you $1,000 off. Get it put into the quote because, again, the last thing you want to be doing is having to renegotiate that later in the process. You want to make sure that's in your quote up front. So, I think those items make up a really good quote when you can get those things covered. I don't know if, Colin, you wanted to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'd probably, just to make it really clear, specifically provide a list now of those items so people can take those away and note those down. So these are the common items. Now, there are other types of builds out there. You're talking like knockdown rebuilds and things like that. We're talking about the normal, greenfield estate, house and land package type product. And within those quotes, what you can expect, as we said, so a base price. That's number one. That'll be in there. That'll be the price of your house plan with the standard inclusions that builder provides. Number two, there's going to be some site costs in there. As we said, that's going to be the foundation of the home. And in addition to site costs, they may be wrapped up in one figure or split out into others. There'll be council requirements, OH&S requirements. Okay, we're talking about things like temporary fencing and those sorts of things might be included as one bundle price or split out. The facade choice, that's another one you must be in there. It must be a visual image of that facade and the one you've picked, whether that's a standard one or whether that's an upgraded facade. Like you said, Darren, bushfire attack level is something just to be mindful of. And if you've got titled land, you can look that up and it'll show you basically there's a colour overlay that the consultant can look up for you. And if it's sort of a brownie colour, if it's got brownie colour on top of the block, it means it's requiring the additional things you need to achieve a bushfire attack level. And usually that's considered or called a BAL 12.5, depending on the area. There are higher versions as well. And if you are on untitled land, what can happen is you can still look up the block or at least the area around that. and the consultant can look that up for you and say it might be in a bushfire zone today as we look it up. So we'll put the price in and account for it. However, when you get closer to your land being titled, perhaps the bushfire zone's been pushed out further. Okay, so bushfire attack level is one to look at. Estate covenant's really important, that one, because when you buy a block of land, as we said, you're going to have a list of things in there that you need on or in the house, and it is, I guess, the consultants at the builder, it's the consultant's responsibility to review that with you and make sure you've got those things in there, such as recycled water, eave requirements, and if there's brickwork above garage or above the windows, and ceiling height requirements. Just depends on the developer. Again, I'll repeat though, the importance of estate covenants are quite high. If you've got an estate or a block of land in a state with a long list of covenants, that's not a bad thing. It may cost you a bit more in your build quote, but it's actually a good thing because it will deter investors from coming into your estate, because investors are price focused most of the time, and they will go and buy an estate that has less requirements or less covenants. So look for estate covenants. These days there's an easy document from the developer that outlines step by step what's required.
Also,
go, Daz.
Colin,
Yep.
I was just going to say, they're also there to protect the consumer. So, you want to build a really nice house, you want to put a really nice facade on it, you want to comply with those design guidelines, particularly the aesthetic items, not so much because some of it's aesthetic and some of them also these days are really trying to drive environmental outcomes, right? But the aesthetic stuff, the last thing you want to do is build a beautiful house and next door they put in a pink shed, and so you'd be really disappointed if your neighbour built a pink shed that devalued your property. And so the covenants are there to really protect you, to make sure that they have to still comply to a certain standard level of facade and look of the house and street sort of scape, to make sure that the place looks good, and then that helps them to maintain your property value. So
and
I think they're awesome.
That does include even the species of plants and trees you can have in your landscaping. That's all factored in. The type of fencing, is it timber, is it colour bond? Like the developer will outline all of that. Okay, so the other thing is promotion. So most people will have some form of promotion, perhaps maybe a discount or whatever offer they got going on. So look for that and make sure that's in there. And then obviously your additional upgrades that you're spending, you might upgrade on flooring or whatever cosmetic features that you like. Make sure that they're all documented clearly. If you are making structural changes, then definitely make sure that they're A, in there, B, priced up, but C, make sure they're dot pointed and written up correctly. Okay, so I do find sometimes from the sale through to the paperwork that goes into the office, it can be a little bit of grey. And if it's not detailed properly in your quote, then the person in the office of that builder may misinterpret that, and then that can sort of waste a bit of time getting back to what you want.
The example of that, Colin, would be add an extra bathroom. Right, could be just that, and you and I have both seen it before, where someone's written add an extra bathroom. Yeah. Well, where do you want the bathroom? Yeah. What do you want in the bathroom? Like what you're really saying is you'd like to add an ensuite to a bedroom upstairs on a 2-story, and that might be an allowable structural change for that builder, and may or may not be. So I'm not making those assumptions, but if it is, that may be allowable. Now, great. Where's it going to be? It's going to be between the 2 bedrooms. Right, we're going to reduce the size of this room to make it fit. We're going to now have a 900 by 900 shower, a single vanity, a toilet suite in there. They're going to be positioned in these areas. And now all of a sudden it's becoming quite specific to what that is. The door's going to be entering from this side of the room, etc. And it's now going to be also sketched up and looking really clearly on a set of plans. And those design structural changes are now looking much more like they're going to work. You can physically see them work on the paper, but they're also detailed off so that you're getting those inclusions. And it can be interesting reading sometimes what's provided by the sales consultant. So, as a consumer, you want to be able to go, well, how's someone else going to read that? And at least ask for a bit more detail to be added so that you capture what you're after.
Yeah, that's right. And sometimes a consultant won't be able to give you full detail because it will need to be drawn to make sure it works properly. But we're just saying, as long as there's a few dot points that describe the brief of what that ensuite upstairs is going to look like and what's in it, then the drafting team will design it accordingly. And then the last couple of items, the colour allowances if necessary. Okay, so some people put them in, some don't. That's basically a preempted amount that you may potentially spend when you go and do your colour appointment if the builder is offering that, and also for electrical upgrades and things like that, worth considering. At least ask the question. Last thing I'd say, Darren, is when you got titled land, you said before that the builder might fix the price for 6 months or 12 months and so on. However, if you've got non-titled land, that means it's not ready to build on. It's not yet, ready to go in that sense. The builder will say, let's say they provide 6 months included, but your land's due in 9 months. What the consultant will do is they'll add a thing called a contingency fee. That's a monthly fee that essentially factors in, additional price increases. So let's say it's $1,500 a month in addition for that extra 3 months. They'll pop that into the quote up front, and that means that you are then covered for that 9-month period. Okay, so if you've got non-titled land, make sure you ask about contingency and price protection periods. So they're probably the main things, Darren, the list of people, what people should look out for. The last thing we'll cover, just to finish off here, guys, is we'll talk about, I think, maybe 4 common mistakes that home buyers make during the quoting process in our experience. So I'll go with the first 2. The first thing I can share is I think clients get hung up on comparing specific items too much. So what we'd encourage you to do is look at the overall price, look at the plan, make sure that the plan is what you want, and the build, you like the builder, and et cetera, et cetera. Don't be worried if one site cost is $11,000 and one $16,000, because there's reasons for that, and it's not going to matter at the end of the day. And again, to the garage door example, don't worry if one's $800, one's $1,000. Get to the bottom figure and get to your needs and wants list, and make sure that everything you want is in there, or everything you can afford is in there. That's really important. Okay, so the key things that will vary are base prices, site costs, and promotions. They're the 3 levers that will be pulled in different ways by builders based on their standard level of specification or inclusion. And some will start with the basics, as we said earlier, and some will include more upfront. So at the end of the day, it will all come out in the wash. So make sure you do that. The other one I would say, Darren, is really important is based on the quoting period. People tend to lean towards and pick the cheapest builder just because they are the cheapest. Again, and we have said this before, do not do that, particularly in the environment we've seen the last couple of years. If you like the floor plan, you trust the consultant, you like the builder, then go with that one. Even if they're $5,000, $10,000, even $15,000 more over the course of your whole period of your loan, it really won't make much difference, but it will make a huge difference if you're going with someone and a floor plan that you like and all those everything's in there that you need and want. Then it'll create a better journey for you. Okay, so don't just stick with the cheapest price, would be my second common mistake. Darren, what about you?
And I think on that note, Colin, I always use the example of people when you go to sell your house later. So you've bought the house, you've lived in it for a number of years, and you go to sell it. If you get a great real estate agent selling that property, that 10 or 15 grand will become absolutely irrelevant. You're going to have lived in the house, love the house more because you've bought the place you really wanted. And then you get a great real estate agent, they end up having an auction, and they just get someone to do that a few more times. Just lift their hand a few more times, right? And all of a sudden, that's $10,000. Hold on, they did it again. That's $20,000, right? And very quickly, a great real estate agent at the selling end later, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 years down the track, is going to bridge any of that money whatsoever. You're not even going to think about it. And if you thought, you mentioned, I think in the last episode, Colin, if you talk about 10 grand, what that really costs, it's about $50 a month, right? So if the quote was 10 grand more, you're going to pay about 50 grand a month. It's not
$50.
Huge amounts of money, right? Sorry, $50.
50 grand would be a fair reason not to do it.
10 grand costs you $50 a month, right? Yeah. So when you break it down to the small number, would you miss out on the house of your dreams for 10 grand? So would you miss out on the house of your dreams for $50 a month? Well, I wouldn't. I'd sacrifice a coffee a day.
Yeah.
To cover that. And it's going to be more, I'll be more in front. I'd rather get the house of my dreams so that, you end up there. So it's certainly a good way to consider it. I guess a couple other points. They try to compare the quotes in detail themselves, and that's always difficult. Why? Because you've got all these different varying inclusions. You're probably not an expert in doing so. Wander on in and have a chat to the sales consultant. If you really want, and you're comparing two, Get them to compare each other. It's not about driving the price down. It's about you getting a true understanding of what they're including and what their competitors are including, and get them to break it down for you. But they'll come up to you with these are the things that we're doing really well, and these are the things that we don't think the competitor is, and vice versa. And then you get to make an educated decision from there. So, that can certainly help. And they eliminate builders based on reviews and Facebook discussion groups. And, certainly don't get us wrong. There are genuine comments and reviews out there. But there's also a lot of misguided comments and one-sided reviews, and you don't often get to the real story. So by all means, do your homework, right? And we certainly encourage that. But also to talk to a few happy customers. Have you had a few happy customers? Would you mind if I had a chat to them? And something like that. If you see someone walk into a display and they're talking about already building with that builder, ask some questions. If you're driving around the estate and you see someone's house there and they're out the front and, how'd your build go? Was it good? Was the process good? Was the experience good? Were you happy with all that? So there's other ways to get more realistic data, and also it can be isolated to areas. So sometimes you can end up with a tougher area that's getting bad reviews, and that's tarnishing a whole state, for example, where it might just be isolated back to a smaller area. So, don't eliminate the builder based on that. Do your homework, ask more questions, and make sure that you leave there happy. If you don't go home and sleep well at night, then maybe don't proceed with that builder and keep shopping so that you do go home and sleep well at night.
Probably just say, and I'll add there, Darren, the review stuff. So, one example I've used is that when people go through an experience with a builder, let's say 3 people purchased the same home, same area, and got the same service and experience. And during the build, one thing went terribly wrong, but the builder identified it, went and fixed it, and off on their merry way. Client number 1 says, that's fantastic. You told me about the issue, communicate it to me, you fixed the issue, I'm wrapped, 5-star. Client number 2 says, yeah, okay, you shouldn't have made a mistake, but you told me. Okay, I'm cool with that. 3-star. Client number 3 says, you made a mistake, you shouldn't have, not good enough, 1-star. Do you know what I mean? So that's what happens. And please keep it in mind. And we did go off topic, so apologies for that. But anything else to add to finish this one up, Daz?
No, mate, I think, again, if you've got any questions around it and you wanted to ask a specific question back to yourself, you can certainly jump on the Home Building Hub website and shoot us through a message, and we'd be happy to come back and help you in any way that we can to try and clear any of the cloudiness you might have about the quote you've got in front of you. And it's certainly something we'd be happy to assist with.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, if you're happy, leave us a 5-star review. Thank you so much for listening. We love the feedback so far, and we'll keep providing some more value to you. We'll break down those items and give you an episode per the main core items in a quote. And other than that, Daz, I think we're good to go. So thanks for listening, guys. We really appreciate it, and we will see you on the next one.